Right now, the U.S. bishops have the worst PR problem ever. Nobody trusts a United States bishop. Everybody thinks that they're lying, they're cheating, they're covering up predators, financial misdeeds. So you would think at this moment of crisis, late 2019, they would be like, yeah, let's just get one of our boys canonized, at least then we got a saint. But no, they don't want
No,
Fulton Sheen to be their canonized saint.
no, no. In fact, yeah, I would argue that they're basically turning Sheen into a sacrificial lamb for their own sins. They're making Sheen pay for their own derelictions of duty, and they're trying to, basically they see the attorney general's bus headed towards them, and they want to stop it by throwing Fulton Sheen underneath it, and it's appalling because Sheen was Bishop of Rochester for 3 years, 1966 to 1969. How many cases could he possibly have bungled? It just, he barely got there before he left, and so the idea that he is somehow the poster boy of covering up abuse is a joke, and we've seen no evidence so far from any of the people involved, including Montano, that he even mishandled one case, let alone multiple cases. Show us the evidence of that at least. But as we've seen with the canonization of John Paul II, that's obviously not an impediment. Having mishandled an abuse case is not an impediment to becoming a saint under this pontificate. So why are there these double standards with respect to Fulton Sheen? Why is he suddenly subjected to this very, very high standard of having handled every case perfectly? And I'd like to see Montano and all these kind of voices in the background that are insinuating that there are other cases out there that Sheen screwed up. Show us those cases. They've had Rochester has had how many years to look to examine the files with respect to Fulton Sheen? They've had years and years and years to do that. They know all the cases that he would have handled. Why are they being so mysterious and vague about this? And it all, to me, it looks just like a big smear of Sheen. And but at the very least, I'm open to the possibility that he did mishandle a case. I'm willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads, but nobody's supplying us with that evidence, and we're supposed to be waiting for this a left-wing hack attorney general in New York City who's endorsed by the NAACP and the National Organization for Women. We're supposed to wait for her to let us know whether or not Fulton Sheen is a saint. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, we all know why they want to block this. He's an enemy. Fulton Sheen is an enemy of Spellman. And Spellman is the granddaddy, spiritually and in all other ways, of Theodore McCarrick. There is a apostolic succession of all
Right.
this perversion. I shouldn't use the word apostolic. There's a perverted succession in the United States hierarchy, and Spellman is where a lot of the rot derives from. And we know that Fulton Sheen and Spellman originally, I understand, were close and friends, but there was a falling out, and Fulton Sheen was always, locked horns with Spellman. And Theodore McCarrick and everyone who descends from Theodore McCarrick's influence, and that includes Donald Wuerl, that includes Blaise Supich, that includes basically everyone who has a red hat, Tobin, right? All these guys, and then Dolan, who's in New York, kind of has to preserve this legacy. These guys are not going to allow this guy right here, Fulton Sheen, to be the bishop saint of the United States of America. Also, Fulton Sheen was against communism. And
Right.
currently, the candy of the day in the church is communism. This is what the
Right.
bishops and the pontificate want to promote. Look at China. If you don't believe me, look at China. Who brokered that deal in China? Theodore McCarrick. So this
Right.
is why they don't. And also, Fulton Sheen said, "Hey, the episcopate and the clergy will be corrupt. There will come a time when the laity have to sort this out," which is
Right.
exactly what's happening in 2019. They don't want Fulton Sheen.
Right. Yeah, and Sheen also gives off an odor in their view of the pre-Vatican II church, the American Church of the Baltimore Catechism. he gives off too strong an odor of that for their taste, and that's I think another reason why they didn't want him to become a saint is that he represents the very American Catholicism that they're trying to stamp out, you know, and they don't want they don't want a bunch of bishops to look to Fulton Sheen as a model. That's the last thing they want.
Yeah.
They want, they want people to think that Tobin and Supich and Worrell are models of good Episcopal governance and good Episcopal teaching. And so, yeah, there's a huge element of, I think, jealousy at work here. And as you're saying, we are seeing sort of the mischief of Cardinal Spellman's grand nephews. If these guys are the nephews of McCarrick, they're the grandnephews of Spellman. And yeah, Spellman hated. Spellman went out of his way to try to damage the career of Sheen. He took him off the air. He made sure that he wasn't on TV anymore. He wouldn't let him. He wouldn't even let Fulton Sheen preach at St. Patrick's Cathedral for many years. And then he exiled him to Rochester. Made sure that he was exiled to Rochester, which is, for a New Yorker, at Rochester looks like Siberia. And it's not surprising to me that Sheen, only lasted there for 3 years because it really was a very undesirable assignment, particularly at that time when the church was completely coming apart. And Sheen was actually much more effective and much more used to the church as a kind of freelancing bishop who was going around the country and around the world teaching the faith. And he really wasn't well suited to be a bishop in the first place. But yeah, I think what you said is true. That yeah, he's too anti-communist to be a saint under this pontificate. He's too pre-Vatican II-ish to be a saint under this pontificate, and he's too American in a way to be a saint under this pontificate. We know that Francis has an antipathy towards Americans. He doesn't particularly like Americans. He has a kind of anti-Yankee mindset that's very typical of Argentine leftists. And I'm sure that's colored his view of whether or not the Sheen beatification should go forward. One of the things I've noticed in all the coverage is that the Pope is kept completely out of the coverage. The blame is placed on Parolin, that Parolin made the decision to pull the plug on the beatification. Well, give me a break. I mean, nothing happens at the Vatican without Francis's approval. So anything that Parolin did, he does with the approval of Francis. So this was Francis killing the canonization of Sheen because a bunch of American cardinals who have his ear, like Supich and I guess Dolan to a certain extent. I mean, 2 weeks ago, Dolan and Matano and all the New York bishops were over in Rome for an ad limina visit. And do we really think that during that period they weren't whispering to Parolin and to Francis and to everybody at the Vatican, hey, we got to stop this Sheen beatification?